Ready to go. All right, we got it. All right, thanks everybody. Happy New Year. It's good to see everybody in the new year, and hopefully we have another good one without the flood. That would be good. I'm going to call the January 10th, 2023 Moab City Council meeting to order. And I would like to have Deputy Chief Bell lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Lex. First item of business in this new year is citizens to be heard. And it looks like Char's here to talk to us about community yard sale at Old City Park.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing this citizens to be heard. I'll first admit that last year I just went ahead and planned a community yard sale for March, April, May, and June. And it was a big hit at Old City Park. We did not make a reservation. We were very attentive to anybody who was using Old City Park. I had a number of people very disappointed when we decided, because our main participant was a woman who had lost her husband and was selling things from all over the world that both of them had collected. So my request for the City Council is to approve the use of Old City Park on the first Saturday of every month without charge to recycle many of the items that people collect in their homes and wish to distribute to other people, sometimes making $5 and sometimes this particular lady sometimes makes $100. But what happens is the people have a venue where they can go. Now, I know we've had farmers markets, I know we've had art markets and all different kinds of things that have happened down, usually at Swanee Park. This one is at Old City Park. I went in and spoke with Annie today, told her that I plan to come today and request from the council permission to hold these without charge. You know, I believe in checking into it, it was $50, $75, something like that, to hold something like that for 2 hours in the morning. I believe we're all taxpayers. I'm going to throw a couple of names out there so that you know that people are interested in it. Drew Roots, Michelle Hill, CJ, and a number of other people. Some of them brought tables full of things. My request is that whatever they bring, they take back with them so that we leave the park as spotless as we found it. And I am going to, with your permission, write an email to the council and ask that perhaps this could be put on the agenda for approval at the next meeting or one of the next future meetings before the 1st of March, first weekend in March. Thank you for your time and attention. Any questions? I'm only asking for 2 hours once a month.
Sure. Can you just repeat, did you say like, was it the first, like Saturday or Sunday? I just missed that part.
The first Saturday
Okay.
of the month, beginning in March, because of the weather. We start in March and end in November. So,
Thanks, Char. We'll look for
Thank
your
you.
email.
thank you.
Just taking some notes. All right, just so everybody knows in the public that citizens to be heard, that's their opportunity to speak on any item on the agenda or other issues aside from the public hearing. So it doesn't look like there's anybody else. Joe, do you have anything? Okay, for citizens to be heard. So we'll move on to the chief department head report on police department. Great event on Saturday night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Yeah, I wanted to start with that by just thanking all of you for your support, those of you that were there, and it was just awesome to have you there. We received many comments from our officers and our civilian employees just expressing their gratitude for your attendance and just how supportive that they felt by you being there and their remarks you made. So thank you so much. We felt it was a great event as well. We felt like it was kind of a culmination of the first 8 months of being here. And I feel like it demonstrated some progress that we made, at least as far as staffing, morale, and we're going to continue to move forward. The next piece of that, though, outside of we're in the process, of reevaluating our entire policy manual, and we're making great progress there. It just takes a lot of time to bring new policies forward and read them and work through it. But we're making great progress. But the next step is training. Once we get people onboarded, we absolutely have to train them the right way. So that's really what I'm talking about today. As we get new hires in from post and lateral hires, actually, they all will start off with a 2-week in-house academy. So at least 80 hours of training before we even put them into a patrol car. And that training really encompasses ensuring that they review and accept all citywide and police department policies, that we familiarize them with the records management system. They learn how to collect evidence, analyze evidence, and submit that evidence properly. The use of technology. We introduce them to different members of the community, different stakeholders and service providers, how to properly use their vehicle and their equipment, their body cameras. We also certify them on their tasers, their OC spray, and their firearms, and also discuss how we prefer for them to write police reports. So all very important items. You probably saw some of our officers actually going through their taser certification on social media. Assistant Chief Bell's done an outstanding job most recently as far as being way more informative on Facebook, and we plan to expand that going forward. All of our new hires from post they'll in addition to this 2-week in-service training and in addition to their post training, will go through 400 hours of field training with their FTO, their field training officer. And we track all their progress through a program that was here before I got here, Agency 360. And it really has different benchmarks that they have to check off before we release them to patrol. So it is a good program that was here that has checks and balances in place, and we're going to continue to use that program.
Chief, can I ask just a quick question?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I get forgetful, just to help us all and the public understand, how long it takes to onboard a new officer. Can you remind me how long is post?
Post is it's about 3.5 months.
Okay, thanks.
But it really takes longer by the time I get them hired and then through the background, it's longer than that. Obviously, we're
Okay,
5
sorry
months.
to interrupt, but
No,
that
you're
helps with
fine.
my timeline. Okay.
As far as lateral hires, it's the same exact process. So without going back through all of it again, the only difference is we've created a process where we can abbreviate their 400 hours of training. And that's necessary because we're bringing officers on board. Some have 20 years of experience, some have at least 5. And so we want to make sure the training that they've received prior to arriving here is good. So we still run them through the Agency 360 program, make sure they check off all the boxes. But if they provide certificates and proof of training they received, typically law enforcement training nationwide is provided by similar organizations. So we accept that as long as we can show that they're demonstrating the competency that we expect while they're on the TL. So after they're through this initial training, or officers that are here or have been here, their post does require that every officer goes through at least 40 hours of training within their agency, and at least 16 hours. So you have 24 agency specific hours that we have to provide. And that's really up to us as an agency on what we train on. But then there's an additional 16 hours that was required as of last year's legislative session, so last July. And those 16 hours have to surround arrest control, de-escalation, mental health and crisis intervention, and autism spectrum disorder training. And so those are just kind of a new thing that law enforcement has to navigate through and ensure our officers are trained on each year. And I'm sure that probably will change the legislative session this year, actually, or there may be additional requirements. And most recently, as of, I think it was last week, that all of our department went through the mental health and crisis intervention training. 4 hours of that was provided by Four Corners. And we have autism awareness training scheduled for the first week of February. So we have developed a training calendar for the rest of the year, and I was hurrying to run through this, but in January, we are working through the majority of the 16 hours that were required by post. We did get new pistols. We appreciate your support in allowing us to buy new handguns last year. We finally got those in with the optics that we needed to get on those. We're going to be certifying all of our officers next week on those firearms. Arrest control, And then on top of the mental health and crisis intervention, this month, all of our officers will receive training on our updated domestic violence policy and lethality assessment protocol. In February, we're going to focus on search and seizure, search warrants, crime scene and evidence processing, de-escalation, and we hope we have our new rifles by then. And although that's been an adventure that we can talk about another day, but we hope to have those by then and get all of our officers certified on the new rifles. In March, we're going to focus on traffic investigations and enforcement, emergency vehicle operations. We're going to have another active shooter drill at the schools. We did that when I first arrived, and it was a big hit amongst all the enforcement agencies. We're going to be a little bit, we're going to have more time to prepare for this and communicate, and probably have more role players. We've talked to, I actually talked to Karen Kay this week about having some of the teachers who have concealed weapons permits participate in this, so they understand what that would look like if we were to have a real life scenario, and ensure that they're prepared for something like that. Hopefully it never happens. We're gonna, every quarter, we're gonna have firearm shoots just to make sure our officers are proficient in when and it's appropriate and how to properly use their firearms. In April, we're gonna focus on sexual assault response and investigations. May, we're gonna focus on written and verbal communication, as well as diversity and cultural awareness training. We're working with the Multicultural Center to provide that training, hopefully. June, again, firearms, we're going to focus on city ordinances and additional policies that we should, at that point, our policy manual should be pretty up to date, I believe. July is report writing. August is officer safety tactics, mental health and wellness. September, we're going to focus again on domestic violence response and investigation, as well as trauma-informed response. And again, more tactics and firearm certifications. October, digital forensics, social media investigations, and we're going to focus on youth, vulnerable adult and elderly safety investigations. November, quarterly firearms again, and building searches. And then December, we're going to focus on overall department leadership. And again, another active shooter response drill attempted at the hospital. So that's really our yearly training goals and what we're going to focus on. Again, last year you allowed us to purchase Police One, which is another training platform where officers can log on. We can assign specific trainings, especially if we identify a person that's in need of a specific topic. You can assign additional training for them to take advantage of. And then we have, many different specialty assignments that we really can send every officer through, but we certainly need expertise within the department. That includes violent crimes, narcotics enforcement, digital forensics, information related to new technologies, against sexual assault, domestic violence. Fit interviews is something that's incredibly important to our department. We need officers that can properly interview children, and that's challenging as a skill. And we have some officers here that are outstanding at it, but we need to continue to build that capacity. Death investigations, field training officer, and then we are ordering the 2 EV motorcycles that are actually on order. We'll have to send at least 3 officers through motor school, which will be a significant. It's typically almost 2 weeks to get through motor school. We recently sent 2 officers to become medical examiners to help with the not medical examiners, but medical examiner assistants, where they go out and scene and help with death investigations, and we're partnering with the county to kind of create capacity there. I attend threat assessment trainings, and I also attend IACP, International Association of Chiefs of Police conferences, to identify best practices, emerging technologies and techniques. We are planning on hosting a CIT certification course here in Moab in the fall, as well as the Crime Scene Academy. And I'm coordinating with the new sheriff to better collaborate with their department so we can share training opportunities between our organizations. That's all I have on training, unless anyone has any questions on training.
I just need a definition.
Yes, ma'am.
What is arrest control?
It involves the appropriate way to use force when effecting an arrest. So, every situation is different. We may have arrest control really starts with our presence, right? We would hope that when we tell somebody that they're under arrest, that they're compliant with our orders, and we do not have to use any type of physical force. But if we do have to use force, we want it to be necessary.
Okay.
Reasonable and necessary force, as the statute requires from our officers. So that's really what arrest control is.
Okay, thank you.
Besides the ones that you identified, are any of the trainings being conducted with other agencies?
We hope to train as much as possible with our agencies. Definitely the active shooter drill. That's a large scale exercise, of course. But again, it's our hope that we can really reduce our costs and be way more efficient and effective by involving these outside organizations. I obviously have a relationship with the Department of Public Safety. They're willing to send down instructors for us on different things such as firearms and tactics. Assistant Chief Bell obviously has many contacts from the Unified Police Department. So we see great benefit in working closely, not only for cost savings, but just interoperability. We need to be able to work closely with our partners in law enforcement. If there's a major incident, we need to rely on each other and have strong partnerships. So that's the plan.
Mhm. And for the July training, will you be working with the county prosecutor?
Or I'd have to go back and see what the giving was. Report writing, the mock trial, absolutely. We plan on involving the county attorney and our justice court attorneys as well.
Okay, good. And just to back up to the policy manual, are you doing that in-house?
We have Lexipol is in place, and it is a national recognized program. I mean, almost every law enforcement agency somewhere uses Lexipol. Lexipol provides us with best national standards, best practices. But sometimes those are made by very large police organizations in large cities, and many of them we need to kind of, I guess, customize to the city, and we'll have to make sure. So there's sometimes things that's not necessary. So it reference parts of organizations that exist in larger police agencies that don't exist here. And so, and then also our Utah state statutes are different. So we have to kind of comb through it. And then sometimes there are decisions that need to be made on like who's responsible within the organization to handle something, and that's just something I need to comb through and say, yeah, that makes sense, or maybe we should revisit that and view it from different angles.
Mhm. And are you getting any input from Carly on this, or is it totally in your wheelhouse?
So absolutely, no, I look at most policies, and Charlie defers to me on a lot of things related to law enforcement, specific knowledge, but on major policies like the domestic violence policy, not only am I consulting Carly, I'm consulting our attorneys
Okay,
as well.
good. It just,
Yeah.
There, I'm sure much more aware than I am. There's law enforcement has bled over into the political realm in recent years, and so just important that there be that dialogue, I think.
Absolutely. And right now, the part of the policy manual we're really pushing through now is mainly focused around organizational structure and things like that. So as we get into more complex policies such as sexual assault investigations or use of force or pursuits, those more challenging policies, we certainly way open to dialogue and suggestions from all of you, Carly. And
Okay, great. Thanks.
Any other questions related to training? The last couple of slides I have is just related to enforcement. We put out on social media or broadcasting on social media that we are focusing on red light, stop sign, and crosswalk violations during the month of January. And Ronnie asked me to elaborate a little bit on that. I've asked each sergeant, we've given them assignments to plan a monthly enforcement operation. And some of them we will broadcast through social media because really at the end of the day, we want voluntary compliance. This is a big problem in our city specifically. We see commercial vehicles running the stop sign, pedestrian. I see it every day over at City Park, and it's starting where it's not a matter of if, but when pedestrian safety. But we've already had a few hits since I've been here, and we really want to reduce that possibility of that occurring. So that's why we're very proactive about the information getting out. We really just want people to follow these laws. We will use it as an opportunity to educate the public specifically on the jaywalking portion of it. But obviously blatant red light violations, we're going to write people citations for that because that's a significant public safety issue. I did ask the sergeants to focus, I did present our strategic plans. I really want them to stay within the things that we're focused on. So we will focus on speed and noise reduction. And impaired driving, we've already started that. We worked 15 shifts last quarter specific to impaired driving, and we did arrest several DUI drivers, unfortunately, but I'm glad we got them off the street. Focus on school zones and then violent crime operations. I will probably not broadcast the violent crime operations because we don't want those individuals to know we're focused on those types of things. We need to catch them. So, and then equipment violations. And then the last slide I have for all of you is related to, I know there's a lot of questions about data and we want to provide that data to you, and I'm as anxious for that data as you are. So I have really narrowed down our RMS system to 2 potential options. I think I know the one that I want to move forward with. Kind of the last steps on that are evaluating or consolidating a lot of our current items that we have in place. That includes body cameras, the dash cameras we purchased, because they don't always work well together. And if I go with a specific RMS system, it may be advantageous for our agency to switch all together to that company's body cameras their dash cameras because they all talk better together. They'll create efficiencies within the department. And so I'm exploring the cost of that to see even if it's a possibility for the state within the budget. And the other piece of that is we want to make sure whatever records management system we go with works well with the CAD system at the dispatch center that we're working through. We had a good discussion yesterday with the sheriff and other stakeholders, DPS, about what dispatch services need to look like. And I think there's more to come as well. So, but I do hope to have this selected and be working with Carly and others by the end of February to have a solution in place and get moving forward on implementation. So that is all I have for all of you. Unless you have any questions.
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, I just had a few. So thanks again for putting the information about the targeted enforcement online. And I had noticed that you guys had a comment in there, that a lot of people were letting you know, okay, that's all great, but don't just focus on the locals. We want to see this during the busy times. And so just for people who are listening or want to hear some follow-up about that, I was just telling them I figure we have problems all the time, and it's not always people from out of town that are the problem. So we kind of need to be doing this year round, but just so people know what to expect. I think you kind of said it, but maybe just to reiterate, yes, we will see this during the busy season. And yeah. Oh, great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes people read and sometimes they don't. So I thought just maybe a verbal reassurance to them was good. But I also thought it's an educational moment for people because sometimes they don't realize how many violations we have going on in the quieter seasons. Yeah.
I mean, we absolutely believe in the term I use is informed discretion. And our current system does tell us typically if someone's been warned or cited. So if you've been warned already, you probably can expect a citation from our officers. I would expect that. But I mean, we certainly want to be good partners with everybody in the community. It's all about providing public safety and giving people community compliant. That's why we're so, I guess, forthcoming about the fact that we are going to have these operations. We do want our locals. We want everyone to follow the laws, but we're not targeting locals. It's also a portion of this is setting new expectations for our officers that I expect for them. Assistant Chief Bell expects for them to be out enforcing all of this, to be present in the community, to be interacting with the community, out on their bikes, out on their motors, in their cars, and just really slowing people down. The violations like running red lights and stop signs and the pedestrian stops, and I don't really know that there's a lot of education that needs a citation if you're right, because I mean, someone's life is at risk. I've seen many pedestrians standing there and a car or a semi truck just drives right by them with the lights flashing. And for me, that's pretty unacceptable.
Yeah, no, I think the businesses downtown are most appreciative because they've been kind of the loudest voice because they're there every day. Not all of us are in the heart of Main Street every day, and they have told us continuously how many close calls they see. So I think you guys have a lot of support. My only other question was just if you could congratulate yourselves on your Cops Care fund drive with the Multicultural Center, only because maybe not everyone will know what kind of success you guys had, and I thought it deserved. Yes.
Well, thank you
celebration.
for bringing that up. I want to give one of our officers credit, Lisa Faulkner. She approached me about, I mean, obviously we're thinking about all of that, but she brought forward the idea of doing this during the Christmas season. And so we did. I partnered with, I have to give credit to Rihanna Medina from the Multicultural Center as well, because, she agreed to partner with us on this. Our initial goal over the 2-week period was to raise $1,000 plus as much food as we could to help 10 families. That was our goal. We were able to raise, I believe, like $4,300 and help over 40 families. And so it was great to partner with them. It was great to, thank you. It was also a great opportunity for our officers, myself and Chief Bell, to get out and go meet business owners. And, we certainly didn't want to put pressure on these people, but we wanted them to know that we do care about our community. Our officers are going to be out checking doors, making sure their businesses are locked. And this was just a great cause. I know they're involved in many causes. And so we are grateful for everybody who donated and we're happy to make a small impact in the community.
Thanks.
Anything else for the chief? Kaylin?
I just following up on Ronnie's question. If citizens are able to observe a moving violation or are able to positively ID the vehicle and call it in promptly, is there action on that typically, or if an officer is available?
They certainly can call it in, and we certainly could issue a citation, but they would be the person that would have to testify to it in court. Those are typically pretty challenging to prosecute. And so we certainly want to be aware of it, especially reckless drivers. Typically we can catch up to a reckless driver and impaired driver, even if our officer has to leave the city to catch up to them. We're going to encourage them to do that. And then we can typically observe the same driving behavior, be the people that record it hopefully and then testify to it. But it is possible here to answer the question. It's just typically not. You know, it's challenging. I think a prosecutor would tell you it's sometimes challenging because they're not necessarily experts on the law. They don't have proof that the violation occurred. It's their word versus the driver's word. There's a lot of different challenges related to that.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else for the chief? Thank you. Great report. It's
Thank
good
you.
to meet the new officers. Looking forward to meeting the rest of them when they come online.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Thanks
Good.
again.
All right. Thanks. Next on our agenda, we have 6 items on the consent agenda. The first 2 items are approval of appointment to the mayor pro tem position, which Tawny's agreed to continue, and also approval of appointment of a council member to review the city bills for 2023, and Tawny's also agreed to provide that service. If anybody else is interested, let me know, and I'm sure Tawny would be happy to share how to do that.
I'm
Yes.
I'm just going to make a plug as someone who started council and did that for 2 years in a row, that I do think it is good. And you know, for nerdy people, it's kind of fun, but I do think it's good if it changes. So everybody does have a shot at it because it's good to understand.
I think it's really informative to understand how much money it takes the city to do certain things. So
All right, so you're on notice for next year, for those folks that are gonna be here for next year. All right, so those are the first 2 items. This third item is the reappointment of Ruben, and I'm probably gonna not to do so well with his last name, Villapando Salas, to the Moab City Planning Commission. I spoke with Kaya and Luke. I'm sure you're aware of that. He's a great addition to the Planning Commission, and I think it would be great for him to continue. And then we have the presentation of the financials from July through November of 2023. That was in your packet. Approval of the minutes, December 13th. Seems like a long time ago. And the approval of the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $357,789.21. So I'll ask for a motion to approve consent agendas item 4.1 through 4.6.
So moved.
Motion made by Kalen. Do I have a second?
I'll second, and I'll just say I sent a few edits on the minutes to Summer, so thanks, Summer.
Okay, so we've got a motion by Kalen and a second by Ronnie to approve consent agenda 4.1 through 4.6. Any discussion, Kalen?
Thank you, Tawny and Ruben.
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
Ronnie, any discussion?
No.
Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-1.
5-1.
I like it.
I mean, 5-0, sorry. I was getting this echo. It put me in another world. 1 is Chuck. Thanks, Tawny. I think his mute. He needs to mute.
Needs to just hope it against the wall.
Check's out of here.
Okay, so our next item, when Chuck will be back in a minute, is the presentation of the construction update of the flood-related water line repair for 100 West that started taking place yesterday. So it was good. It's good for you all to hear where we're going with that, what kind of reimbursements we've got from insurance and that kind of thing. So once Chuck reappears, here he is, right on cue.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I was raised on bark, not Zoom.
All right, Chuck, I introduced it, so you're up, ready to go.
Great. I have a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to share with you. Which I will find. So I'd like to talk to you about the 100 West water line repair, which is, damages were sustained during the August 20th flooding event, where the water line was wiped out that flows under Mill Creek by the Zack's parking lot. It was about 4 to 5 feet underneath the stream bed. We knew it was going to be a problem. It had been put in circa World War II. But we just was on the list of things to get to, and the flood made us get to it quicker than we were able to. As you know, we've had a temporary bypass over the pedestrian bridge since that time, which has supplied water to that part of town. We had choices. The choices were to try to put in a utility bridge just to carry the water over the creek, which would have taken a long time to get permitting and ultimately would have been more expensive. And the other choice was to take advantage of the technology, which is called horizontal directional drilling. And we elected to go that route. And I'll show you a little bit about that here, because I think it's pretty interesting. It'll end up being 400 feet of 12-inch HDPE, which is high density polyethylene, which is perpendicular to and under the creek. About 140 feet of 8-inch PVC along the pathway. So the shared use path next to the green handrails, we've got to rip up some of that because we have to replace the PVC. So we'll have to pour that back after this project happens, you know, as soon as we can. And then the work requires specialized heavy machinery and deep pits. The pipe is 15 feet underground at that location. Looking at the old records, we think it's because Mill Creek is not really where Mill Creek used to be. Mill Creek is where people put it years ago. And so the area by the Zack's parking where we're coming in there was all filled. So they were down low before. So it requires, it's challenging, and we're right up against the road. I'll show you a couple of pictures here, how we're addressing that. And so far so good. One thing I wanted to emphasize is the construction zone is off limits to the public, including the pedestrian bridge. It is just a matter of safety. We don't want anybody getting hurt, either our workers or the public. So I'm sure how we respond to that. I think it's the new way we want to do business for some of these construction projects. The water outages, everyone's concerned about that. We know, and we're well aware of that. They should be minimal until we actually turn over from the temporary to the permanent. And that we hope will be like one day. As they used to say, good Lord, well, then the creek don't rise, right? That'll happen in one day. And then we'll advertise that ahead of time, you know, with 48 hours notice to the people who will be impacted. Work should take 3 to 4 weeks. Hopefully 3, not 4. And this is just the plan set, which I know it's a little difficult to read, but you might find interesting. So this represents the existing ground, this dashed line here. You can see that. And that's the creek. That doesn't show up well on here. You can't see it, but that's the creek in the middle of the screen. And then the blue is the new water line that we're calling out a 15-foot minimum depth below the creek bottom. We've done a scour analysis, and typically the maximum scour you get would be between 10 to 13 feet. And today we're even deeper than that. I'll share you a photo in a second.
So Chuck, can you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
Where was the line? This is where you're putting it. Can you show us where it was before?
Yeah, can you see the cursor is pretty slow, but
Or we can see the elevations on the left. You can tell us how deep it was.
yeah, right. Yeah, right over here on the left.
Ah,
You can see where the blue ends on the left. That's
Yeah.
where the old line,
Mm.
where we're tying into the existing line, you know, outside of the replacement 450 feet. So that's the depth. And if you were to project that straight across, you'd see that we're about 4 feet underneath the creek bottom with the old line.
And so where was the creek before the flood?
The creek wasn't rearranged during this flood. I'm saying that decades ago,
Right.
downtown was kind of rearranged a little bit. It was to the north.
But
Right.
how deep was it? Didn't it get scoured? And didn't it go down?
During the event,
Yeah.
no, because when we did the, I'm sorry, I can't show you a cursor up there. But when we did the 100 West project in 2018, we were, I don't know if the council recalls, those who were here, we did a jack and bore underneath the creek at that time
Oh,
to keep that sewer line underneath there. And that's, and there is a concrete old irrigation grate control structure that was there that didn't let the water, the creek bottom, it temporarily scoured out 10 to 15 feet, but it came back to the stable where it was before the flood. But we're still going 15 feet because during another event, we don't want the same thing to happen. Not only do we have depth as a result of this, the HDPE is a much superior material. It can flex, you know, even during to a limited amount during a flood event or something like that. It'd still be really strong. It's incredible material. We'd like to use it wherever we can. Certainly under creek crossings in the future, that's our choice of material. Thought I'd talk a little bit about project costs. The project cost for the 100 West permanent repair is $320,000. And in about a month, I'll probably be coming back with council would like and talking to you about the 400 East permanent repair. Because remember, we have two crossings of Mill Creek that were wiped out during the flood. And we have the same contractor. Once we're done with 100 West, we'll mobilize over to 400 East and get on that too. So that hopefully we can get that back to normal before the season starts. But both costs are right at $320,000. The insurance trust has approved these repairs, as well as the temporary water line repairs, which were about $15,000 at each location. So, in fact, we received a check for $750,000 last week to cover these repairs, which was the first money we received in response to the floods. You know, since August to December. It's unfortunate it took that long, but it looks like we're making progress. And we still haven't heard back from FEMA. I had my conversation with them last week, and they're having this thing where the insurance company is waiting to tell us everything they'll cover because they think if FEMA is going to cover something, they don't want to cover it. And FEMA hasn't decided if there's enough damages here to justify the president signing it. So we meet weekly and we try to work through it, and hopefully we'll get some FEMA money to supplement the trust money. But at this point, I just don't know that. But we're still engaged with them. But
so is there anything that we could do with our federal representatives to help push that through, perhaps?
you know, if you would give me another maybe week,
Okay,
I was in contact with Congressman Curtis's office, his chief of staff, and she said that she was going to follow up this week with FEMA. And if we don't have any success during that, then I think that I'll tell Carly.
yeah, because we can certainly write a letter, make phone calls, whatever we need to do.
Yeah,
to help
you know,
maybe put a little
it's
pressure on it.
it's so strange. I mean, it's just a relative thing. I think from FEMA's perspective, 5 million damages to Moab and 1.6 million from the hurricane. You know, I think we just get lost in the shuffle. To be honest
Right.
with you,
Yeah.
I'm not justifying it. I just think that's
Yep.
some of what happens.
Bureaucrat. Mhm.
But we'll continue to work that, and I'm keeping Carly posted on it regularly, weekly.
Good.
Okay. These are some pictures real quick. I won't belabor it, but this was right after the flood. And you can see we had the, how it was just torn up down there and the scour, and that's why we had to, and we saw the old line sticking up out of the water. And this is the pipe across the bridge now, and you see what we've done is we have put chain link fence around our construction zone as part of the project cost. And I think in the future, that's what we're going to have to do because we continually have people coming through our work zones, destroying the traffic control devices. I talked to some of the public works supervisors today, and we're losing thousands of dollars because people just insist on going through these work zones. Why, I don't know, but, and so we're putting in, because we don't want people, innocent people to get hurt in these work zones because the traffic control devices have been torn down. Because literally people are tearing them down, throwing them in the creek and throwing them in the side of the road. So we're gonna put in chain link fence. You'll probably see a budget year, we're gonna have a request to buy some chain link fence panels. So when our bigger projects, we'll chain link them and lock them up. And it's probably not a bad thing to do, but we've tried everything else. So, and on this project, because of the nature of these repairs, that's the horizontal drill rig right there. And as you can see, the stem is coming down to the left on the picture. And what that's doing, it's a 12-inch auger, but it's a 4-inch drill stem, and that's what they're pushing through, and they'll get to the other side of the creek, and then they'll pull the pipe back through underneath the creek. And that's where the trick comes in, because there's cobbles under there, and they'll have to fill it with bentonite clay and try to get the hole to stay long enough to pull the pipe back through, which is why it takes 3 weeks, because today it started this morning. And that's just another look at the drill rig, and that's why we fenced it. There's too much moving parts. This is the operator, and if you can see, this is right at the edge of the creek. At the very bottom, you can see the water in Mill Creek, and this I'm looking down for the pedestrian bridge, and you see that white instrument that he's got there. They have GPS coordinates on their drill rig that he walks along, and so they know exactly, and they're recording it digitally, left or right where the pipe is at, as well as the depth. So right there at that point, I asked, he's 23 feet below that point there, and the creek is about 5 feet deep. So he's actually 18 feet. And we wanted minimum 15. So today was a good day because we made it at least to the creek, and we made it across the creek. And that's a good thing. Also, you'll see what we did in the emergency real quick was that was the broken sidewalk, which we were trying to, was all we had. We didn't have any rock to protect those abutments in the bridge. So we put the sidewalk there, and with the subsequent floods, we got through them, but we now have rock. I don't know if you've been up on Aggie Boulevard on the dirt part, but we had 500 tons of rock delivered. So now we're looking to get a contractor. I've got a couple of proposals in to do the temporary repairs to protect those bridge abutments, because we may have floods again before we get the permanent repairs done. And the trust supports doing that to protect it. This is, and thank you very much from the crews. That's a trench box there in the middle. That's the city's own trench box that we provided. The contractor, they were having a hard time renting one, but we use the heck out of that on our projects, and it makes for much safer projects. It protects those trenches from collapsing when we have employees down those holes. And this is going to be 15 feet deep. That, as you can see right now, they're on their way down. This was this afternoon. And that's why we want to chain link in the job sites. We don't want anybody innocent wandering through the dark or something and get hurt.
I couldn't run one, but I love big boy toys.
That's why you work for the county road
Yes.
department. Any questions for Chuck?
I guess I just have one. So, like in this instance, I mean, I know at some point, we used to have the Parkway go from 200 South right across to 100 South, right? And then with some changes with the property. So, do you think, I mean, we can't force people to read, but I assume you've been having signage. Should we be trying to point people positive since they can't use it to where they can go as an alternate route, or?
We have detour signs.
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah,
We have side, and we,
yeah,
I was interviewed by both newspapers
Yeah.
trying to get the message out. When I can't see duty to try to get the message out, but we have detour routes identified. If people are
yeah.
willing to do that, they can follow the sidewalk detours and get around the project back to where they want.
Yeah.
Anybody else? I was just wondering, Chief, if maybe you guys can patrol that area a little bit more during this project? That'd be great. I think it'd be helpful to have that presence there.
Is this project affecting the pathway underneath Main Street at all, or? I've had some people ask me why Main Street is still closed.
Yeah, so
It was that undercutting.
we exactly, we lost sidewalk, that we lost the retaining wall. Wiped out the sidewalk and the handrails all gone.
Mhm.
So we're waiting for this is the part of, the discussion we're having between the insurance trust and FEMA. Our insurance schedule definitely covered the water lines and definitely covers the bridges. The parkway is a little more questionable. So the direct answer is it's not fixed because it's lower down on the priority list. We want to get these water lines done and get the bridges protected. And then that's the next, plus we still don't have the answer from FEMA or the trust on what funds we'll get for those.
Right.
But we're working on the engine. We're about to secure engineering services because we need a structural engineer to do the retaining walls and so, but it's on the list and it's hopefully, sooner, but honestly, it's going to be a couple of months out before
Right.
we can get it fixed.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Chuck. Keep us posted. And then let us know when you're moving on to 400 East.
Will do.
Okay, great. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
Next up, we have a public hearing on the 2023 CIB application for the Cane Creek Boulevard reconstruction project. I'm going to go ahead and open that public hearing at 6:48 PM. And then Chuck and Richard, I guess, are going to give us a presentation. Okay, Chuck and Richard's there. If anybody has any questions, he did a lot of work on the application.
That's right.
And so council, the next item on the general business is to talk about the task order for this project. So there'll be a lot of opportunity at that time to ask questions of Chuck regarding this application. So public hearings open. Go.
Great, thank you. We're looking at the Cane Creek Boulevard reconstruction project from 500 West to US 191. And there were some things we'd like to point out in talking to, because we're applying for the CIB funding. There's some things that they've asked us to mention in this public hearing. So we're specifically talking about some of those items tonight, as well as we want to share all the information and answer any questions we can. This will be a complete section replacement of the road. It's not going to be just a chip seal or a overlay. It's going to be a total reconstruct. Everything will get picked up and then we'll rebuild it. It will improve storm drainage. Road has serious problems with storm drainage. And if there's not a lot of it, it kind of funnels on the curve there. But we'll address that. We'll replace some sewer and water lines that are there as well. So this is a complete reconstruct. The sidewalks almost between where the health department is, all the way up to the road yard, needs to be replaced. The concrete wasn't the finest apparently because it's falling and cracking, but also the tree roots have destroyed that sidewalk, and it's, and we'll talk more about it, but we'll keep those trees, every bit of them. I can't promise you we don't need to take one, but we know that the trees are important and we'll try to not take in, but we're going to have to be creative because those roots are so high. We can't just rip up that sidewalk and put another one in the same place. I've got an idea of what to do, but it'll shake out in design. But the sidewalks are an important part of it. They're not even close to ADA compliant at this point. We'll install RRFBs at a minimum at the existing crosswalk, which is there by the Episcopal Church. That gets a lot of use, and we've had a lot of, all these projects, I spend time watching, what's going on just to get an understanding. And so does other staff. And we really think those pedestrian activated beacons would be a real plus. And I see them being valuable. Council likes them and the public likes them. I see us having opportunities at 3 or 4 other places in the city where if we can afford those would be good to have. Green infrastructure features, we're going to maximize those with stormwater and with pedestrian bulb outs, as well as some other items that we'll look at. And that's a key. We understand that council wants this to be a gateway project, and it's what we have in mind. Conceptual engineer's opinion of cost, and I say that because we don't have a design done, but our design engineer we're recommending in the next agenda item has done an opinion of cost based on everything that we do know now, which is some, but it's not enough that you get into a design in terms of actual quantities and things like that. They estimate the project total to be 8.8 million. And that includes everything. That includes engineering, that includes analyses, it includes public involvement. It includes geotechnical exploration, which we need to do because we know that in places we're near groundwater over there because we're so close to Pack Creek. And we want to make sure that we don't have surprises there. But they also say that it's between 6 and 8. My original estimate was 5. But that's before I put in a lot of the green infrastructure and added in the erosion protection on Pack Creek by the health department, which really it needs to be done. It's real. We've been lucky that nothing's happened there. It's not guaranteed to be refined as the design progresses, but this is their best judgment, and they're qualified to make that. And I've reviewed it. And I think it's high on the high side, but I don't think it's terrible. Proposed project financing, $7,939,000 from the Permanent Community Impact Fund Board, of which we hope that as half of that, which is $3,969,500, would be grant. So that's don't pay back, and then potentially the same amount as a loan. And we put in 1%, but we don't know what that is. It could be 2%, but they've told us that it's pretty low interest. That'd be secured with a sales tax revenue bond. The city would put in $868,000. So if council approves the engineering contract with the next item, that's on the order of I think $498,000 for engineering and $370,000 for construction admin and other things we have to do. There may be some easements that we have to either purchase or lease. That's to be determined after design. Total cost, possible financing scenarios, and this is what CFB wanted to make sure we mentioned to the public tonight. Total cost of the city is subject to change. It's possible that the project total increases as progresses. It's also possible it decreases. There could be construction cost overruns. We always try to minimize that, as you know. CIP offers, they could turn us down, or they could say 100% loan or different loan terms. You know, we're projecting 50% grant, 50% loan. We don't know that till we get into it, until they start evaluating. But we've talked to staff and we have some idea of that. That's why we propose that. The city's determined to move the project forward and will cover all cost increases with sales tax revenue bonds as necessary. That's the overview that we wanted to give.
Great, thank you.
Mayor.
Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'm going to leave this public hearing open until after item 7.1, and then we'll close the public hearing before you vote. So just so you're all aware, the idea is we'll submit our application by February 1st, and then mid-March, we'll make a presentation to the Community Impact Board at their March meeting. And in the meantime, we'll have conversations with the commissioner serving on that board and Curtis Wells, who's the chair, and to kind of get a feel, if we're going in the right direction. And that's really important so that they, know that there's support. So just so you know the timeline for that. And at that meeting, generally, we have an idea of what they're going to provide for us and how much they're going to provide and what split, if it's going to be grant, loan, how much the loan is going to be. So that's the timeline for that. Any questions for me, Ronnie?
Oh, I have a question. So if we as council members have questions or comments on this, I realize it's a public hearing. So do you want us to get up and go over to the table as a citizen, or?
No.
Okay, let us know the appropriate time for that.
Okay. So I'm going to just move right on to the next, unless anybody has any questions for me about CIB.
Well, my question and comment is specific to the application. So I will go up as a citizen if that's what
you
you
don't have
prefer
to.
it.
You can just ask me right now.
Okay, so, I mean, as a resident and a council member, I have a concern with some of the language in the application. And so, I would be remiss not to address it. On page 48 of our full packet, we refer to how this will ultimately give residents and tourists more options for navigating Moab, ideally helping to relieve congestion on 191. And because of the historic discussions about the bypass and ways Cane Creek might be used, I would highly prefer it if that language was changed a little bit, because it is already an option for people to go down Cane Creek. We are saying that we're designing a project that will have green infrastructure and be friendly for adaptive management. So to me, that means that traffic is going to move slowly down this corridor. We have a lot of homes, from senior living to apartments to families living along here. We're talking about giving them good crosswalks to cross. And so to me, it's just a bit, it's probably strong to use the word disingenuous, but it's maybe misleading to say it's going to maybe help relieve congestion that more than the existing street and route already do. So I would personally be much more comfortable if that said it will, ultimately enhance, this corridor for residents and tourists, but I'm uncomfortable with implying that it will further relieve congestion or create more options, specifically in the context of tourists. But we also refer to it later as the locals highway. And I also don't think that that's really the message we want to be sending. At any rate, I'm uncomfortable with that wording.
Okay. And I think that could be changed.
Yeah, I don't know that relieving congestion means people are traveling faster necessarily. I think it's about just expanding.
It's about volume.
It's about the volume.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're mainly talking about road resurfacing. So how is that going to increase volume?
It's if I may.
Yeah.
In my mind, the reason that the first part of your comment about the road is in such bad shape now, the only reason I ever drive that road is if I'm taking my boat out to the river, or taking a trailer through town. If that road was because it beats my truck to death, that road is in such bad shape. When we resurface that road, people will be able to drive it as an alternative. It's not really, in my mind, it's not a bypass because it's not crossing the river and going over. It's just another way to get through town and avoid going through downtown, because it's an improved road surface that'll be designed to move traffic, as opposed to a lot of people don't like to drive that road now.
And it hopefully too, with the complete streets component, there'll be incentivized active transportation. So it'll be a road where people will finally be able to connect to the east side and west side of the city. So people will be using their bikes instead of using a car. So I think it's just trying to change volume generally, not just when it comes to cars, but just users.
I guess that
different
concerns me
users.
because we're talking about active transportation. It almost sounds like we're making it more car friendly and we're hoping to see more cars on it. Plus on page 53, we refer to it as a locals highway. And I'll leave it at that, but I'm just saying that makes me uncomfortable because I don't think it's consistent with the messaging we've had or what the community has asked about what they want to see on that road.
The complete streets
If I
policy.
can, I was gonna say, I've talked to quite a few people who live on Mountain View and avoid Cane Creek,
Right.
and so they're accessing other areas of town through the residential neighborhoods to avoid Cane Creek. And I think that it would be nice to get those people back onto Cane Creek, that would make these residential neighborhoods safer, so that part of it, I could see there's a benefit with improving that road, and not. I've heard people say, like, I never drive Cane Creek because it's so rough. I'll go drive down Dock Allen and come out by the BLM office before I drive down Cane Creek.
Okay, well, I'm only responding in part as an elected official who represents many people who are sensitive to the notion of a bypass, especially using Cane Creek as a bypass and implying this, especially when it's going to the CIB, which we know has its own political agenda and slant. And so I just don't want to send any misleading information about what our intention is.
Got it. Kaylin.
I'm wondering if the importance could be conveyed to CIB, but in the form of saying that this is responding to travel trends as opposed to maybe Ronnie's concerned that we're proactively pushing it as for new use.
Mhm.
Whereas what I'm hearing you say, Chuck, is that the demand is already there and may arise organically.
Yeah, cars and bikes.
Yes.
I mean, I think it'll take bikes off of Main Street. I mean, it's definitely gonna be a bike friendly road, just for clarity, Ron, make sure I don't give you the wrong impression there.
Yeah,
No,
and
it's a
certainly
Multimodal projects.
it's not meant to necessarily induce new demand. I don't think that the improvement is to more adequately manage the needs now for that area of town and maybe make it a little more functional of a road. So I wouldn't want there to be confusion to think we want people to go faster or we want like a new route of travel, because that's certainly not the intent. We do want to make a nice boulevard that better serves the local kind of existing demand for
Okay.
that.
And
Yeah,
also, my other
totally
questions
agree.
are related to design, so I'll save that for the task order.
Great. Thanks, Ronnie. And I agree with the language. And if there's a way that we can modify that language so that it's a lot clearer what the intent is, because I know there's a lot of concern about the bypass situation, and we don't want that to be perceived that that's what the intent is, to help support that. This is our project. This is to make our Cane Creek Boulevard a lovely street that we can all be proud of, and not to facilitate a bypass. And I meant to say that at the beginning, so I appreciate you bringing that up, Ronnie. Any other questions on CIB application?
Oh,
Kaylin?
this is more on the task orders.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna keep the public hearing open until we go to make a motion. And just in case somebody shows up and is hearing this conversation and wants to make a point. And I'm just gonna move right in then to general business 7.1, discussion and consideration of the design task force for Cane Creek Boulevard reconstruction project. And just so you know, by approving this, it allows, and Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it allows us to move forward with the design that will provide us with some options. So if it, it's like too expensive, or if CIB comes back and says, hey, we're not giving you 8 million, we're giving you 5, and we have to look for places to cut, that this design process is going to provide those alternatives for us. So we'll have opportunity down the road to have a deeper discussion about what we want the final product to look like and how much we want to spend to get there. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's correct. The task order will include final engineering designs, including updated cost estimates to determine alternatives while we evaluate, we being the community council, the alternatives to come up with a preferred alternative. There'll be costs associated with that. They'll be developed, much like we did with the downtown dispersed parking, where we had alternatives for consideration. It includes permitting, right-of-way surveying, public involvement, and public engagement. We've got 2 public meetings, I think, in there, as well as stakeholder meetings. If we do approve the task order, it'll bolster the CIB application by showing the project's in progress and not just it's something we're thinking about doing. But again, that's council's decision. And I think that is the last slide that I had there. I guess if I may before. So in the task order, we go to 30% plans pretty quickly, as quickly as we can. In a 30%, but we want to do it thoughtfully, because what we want to do at 30% is develop the alternatives. Right now, we've got 3 alternatives that might be heavy on. One might be heavy at green infrastructure. One might be heavy on the sidewalk relocations. I don't know what they'll be yet. There'll be something that'll come out. Actually, all of it will be addressed. And then we'll have a public meeting to get public input on that. We'll come back to council to get we'll share with you the input from the public meetings, go over the project in detail. And then once the council says, well, we'd like this alternative or modified, we'd like this alternative if you modified and did this, we've got budget in there to do 3 iterations of an alternative to get us to an alternative that council would like. Then we'll put a hard cost on that. Then that would be, I believe, Mayor, the time when council could say, okay, we're at $5.6 million. And yes, we think we could do it because we like the product we get. Or you could terminate the contract if you wanted to, actually.
And to clarify, it's just, you're not buying an $8 million project by approving this task order. This is sort of step one for us to start developing design for a CIB application. We're going to discover kind of as design goes forward, what it's sort of shaking out to look like, what the costs are like, and then we'll discover what CIB gives us, if anything else. So it'll be iterative. And it may be we aren't successful with our CIB application and we need to reconfigure. So this, to just clarify, is to get us to 30% design, and then further if we so choose. So don't feel like you're making that decision tonight, because you're not.
Questions? Kayla.
Thanks for answering all my other questions earlier this week. One that I didn't ask was, I didn't see, and I don't know if there's interest in this, but the possibility of incorporating public art, since this is, as was said, potentially a gateway project. And I just wonder if
there's room for that. Yeah. And the dispersed, just like the dispersed parking, it's kind of after the fact. We wouldn't have the contractor. We'd basically work through Andy at the Parks Department, the way we were set up internally. We could identify places where they might fit. Like maybe some of those pedestrian crossings. And then I think Annie would do her method to come up with that. But yeah, I think there's room for that. Absolutely.
Right. I imagine there would be, but if there was just a little bit of thought about it, then maybe those potential locations could be identified in the design process, even if they're not funded.
Yeah, no, since you brought it up, we'll definitely make sure that's talked about early on. Because that's when we come up through when we're at that first public meeting, when we're talking about alternatives, is typically when someone will say, what about public art? So yeah, we want to be able to address it. Thank you.
Chuck, could you just reiterate, do we have a vision yet for extent of crosswalks? Or are we envisioning full crosswalk on both sides all the way from 500 to 191?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Oh,
clearly.
it's okay. Are we envisioning crosswalks on both? Sorry, not crosswalks, sorry, sidewalks
Yeah.
on both sides
Yes,
all the way down?
yes.
And then I know we've had discussions over time about some limitations in what's permitted in terms of frequency of crosswalks. Like, we've had some neighbors ask on Mill Creek Drive about, oh, we live near Rotary Park, we'd like a crosswalk. I mean, maybe coming off Walker or Tusher, and it was like the distance was too short under some law for allowing another crosswalk because there was already one, over to the old Red Rock Elementary. So when in this process, it's the right question to ask about frequency of crosswalks and how many we potentially could have, because it's a 0.8 miles. So it seems like we want definitely more than one. Yeah.
I would think so too. And so typically what the manual and uniform traffic control devices wants is for us to have crosswalks at intersections.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't like to have what they call mid-block crosswalks. We're going to end up with one on dispersed parking on 100 North. And there's one existing on Cane Creek by the Episcopal Church there. And when you look at those, you have to look at them critically, which we'll look at. But the one by the Episcopal Church leads to the path that crosses Pack Creek that gets people to the crosswalk. So there's a reason for that mid-block crosswalk. So that one clearly would stay. And as we got into it, looked at traffic volumes, heard public input, then we'll start looking at, is there a need for another crosswalk? And I'm just going to say where Mountain View comes out by the new condos there. Maybe there's one to get people across the street. I don't know. I'm just suggesting it might be something like that.
Okay, so if people, there will be some kind of open house where people can make suggestions like that
Absolutely.
and say, can we have 3 or 4,
Yep.
whatever it is.
And
'cause
what comes up as a topic. Yeah.
Okay, and then I think I had asked you, can you just give us an update on the Episcopal Church Bridge? Only because we've had a few residents ask us, and I know we've talked about it in budgeting, but I wasn't sure what the latest kind of timeline looked like.
Yeah,
And if
happy
there was,
to do that.
So
what happened? We would have 100% plans and be out to bid, or maybe even have a contractor if the August 20th floods hadn't happened. Because what happened is we had 90% plans, and even though Mill Creek was the primary flooding location, Pack Creek still got floodwaters, not as extensive as Mill Creek, and it rearranged the entire creek bottom. So we couldn't go out to bid because all the volumes had changed, right? We couldn't bid it knowing that the survey was bad. So we have since gone back and resurveyed that, and our engineer is working away at it. I would anticipate having 90% plans by the end of the month. And it's looking like it's gonna be a bridge that we can only get about a 5-year frequency protection from with the budget that we have. If we had more money, we could build a longer bridge. But with the money that we've had kind of worked around it, but we think that'll be a plus. I mean, with that bridge, and we're gonna improve the sidewalk, both the approaches from the Episcopal Church parking lot, we're gonna make that ADA compliant. And which will mean, landings, a couple of landings, and then we'll redo the sidewalk, portion of the sidewalk that comes out to the Main Street. We'll have to come out for the design, and then we'll have to rebuild it back. So I'm hoping to have 90% designed by the end of January, answer your question, which would put us potentially end of February, ready to go out to bid, and then get the project going.
So if there are any, frequent users of that bridge who might have questions or suggestions, they can send those to you.
Yeah.
Or, okay. Because I'm just thinking, I don't use it every day, but the people who do might have some insight, into some, improvements that we could afford that might, end
Yeah,
up
so-
helping. How much, just to give me some idea, like, what is the step up in funds, do you think, to get a longer bridge? Just so I know, millions?
No, hundreds of thousands.
Okay. Okay.
I think Annie got a grant for 150,000, which helped the project.
Yeah, and we're
Um,
matching it.
Yeah.
I think our budget's about 3.
Yeah, and that we're also getting some help from the NRCS for doing it's not land, the stream work. So it's a composite project, which is great, but it's still, I think we're at 300,000 for the bridge portion of it.
Yeah, I know it ended up more expensive than we initially thought because of ADA and stuff, but am I right that we're now set on the budget? Like we can do it, or are we still not?
No, we have
Okay,
budget for the
yeah.
300. Yeah.
Okay, but
But I don't have that 100% cost estimate yet. I mean, just
Right,
as a
right.
caveat.
well, I mean, I think we had talked in some meetings about it being closer to 4. So I guess I was just trying to figure out if we were where we needed to be. Yeah.
Is that true?
Well,
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay.
right.
Thanks for the reminder. Cause
Yeah.
okay.
yeah, no, I hate to be this way, but I have to give so many caveats on cost estimates.
Oh, yeah, no, I think
Like the discussion about King Creek with 8 million. I hope it doesn't come in that high. But 4 years ago, we were talking about that project being 3 million, and that's because the cost has gone up for everything.
Yeah. And I guess I have 1 or 2 other questions, and it might be early to know, but because in many cases, it's the people in our community who have less who are using that corridor, and some of them are English speakers and some aren't. Is this an instance with outreach materials where we could translate them, or at least find some other avenues to?
I mean, for public engagement, we're doing Spanish as well as English. That's in the task order.
Okay, cool. And I think just one other question was, when you're doing something like this, because I know the mayor and I had a conversation, and one always prefers, if possible, to only rip up the road once. Of course, it doesn't always work out that way, but do you feel confident that we've anticipated anything and everything kind of tied into this in terms of neighboring pipes and utilities? And I mean, I just I don't know how many years we have to think out, but in some cases, in other parts of the city, we've realized, oh, okay, it would help us to have a larger pipe, right? And we're doing that in some ways with Birch, and so I just didn't know, is there anything else we should be thinking about that just with?
Obi and Levi and I have had discussions about this, and our consultant, we've had discussions about it. The only one that we've really spent time on, because the only one that bubbles up out of that conversation is the south trunk line.
Mhm.
And in talking with Jeff Beckman, who was our consultant engineer who did the south trunk line, and will be when we get to it. There's probably alternatives to it. And we still don't know what the time frame is. Because we did that 100 West project, we bought ourselves a lot of time on not needing the south trunk line, which was why we did the 100 West project. So I guess the answer is, I couldn't swear to you 100% that 20 years from now, we won't need the
Yeah.
south trunk line through there.
Like, remind me is,
We're cognizant of it, and we're gonna do everything, and we're also looking, it's kind of making the south trunk line come back in terms of alternatives, because there were, when we stopped it, because we did the 100 West project back in 2018, when we set it aside because we had other things to do, there were 3 alternatives. One of them was to go down Cane Creek. There were 2 other alternatives, and we've since revisited those at least, in a 2-hour meeting and talked about these, and we'll have to continue to.
I guess the last question is like the development we're going to see, say, at Lions Back or at the university, is the Lions Back stuff feeding in from the east? Would the development at the university feed into this or not? I'm trying to remember which way all the pipes go. Yeah.
The university does,
Okay.
but Lions Back does not. I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
comes in below.
Okay. No, thanks. That was it for me. Yeah.
Thanks, Ronnie. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing for the CIB Cane Creek Boulevard Reconstruction Project at 7:18. And I will ask for a motion to approve the design task order for Cane Creek Boulevard Reconstruction Project.
I move to approve the attached task order for consulting services with Civil Science, Inc. for the design of the Cane Creek Boulevard reconstruction project in the amount of $498,200.
I'll seconded by Tawny, motion made by Caitlin. Any discussion, Caitlin? Tawny?
No, I'll just be glad when it's done. Cause
That'd
it
be
beats
nice.
my card.
Anybody else? Discussion? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Hi.
Hey,
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, let's get going.
Thank you. We're on it.
I will keep you all posted on the CIB application and the support. I'll probably need you to work with me on in talking to commissioners on the CIB board. All right, next item, 7.2, approval of awarding the contract for lobbyist services for 2023. Carly.
Yes. Right, everyone. In years past, we have been doing yearly contracts with our lobbyists for, I believe, the past 3 years. This time we're reaching some procurement thresholds, so we needed to go out for a competitive bid in order to spend a little bit more money on the lobbying services. We reached the $50,000 threshold, which is why we engaged in this process. We received 3 responses. A committee consisting of Lisa Church, Nathan Bracken, Ben Billingsley, and Jason Taylor got together and rated and ranked their proposals, and their selected recommendation is it Red Hill Strategic. So Casey Hill, who served as our lobbyist in the past. And he, I believe, was the lowest responsive bid at $60,000. So that's the recommendation from the selection committee.
I think it's Lincoln Hill.
Lincoln Hill, that's right.
Lincoln Hill,
He has
yeah.
changed it since he became partners with Lincoln Shirts. That's right.
Jason, since you were on the ranking committee, do you have any comment?
No, I mean, they were all pretty good. I think in reading them, seemed like one of them was kind of a national lobbying group, the 360, and then the other one was a newer firm, I think. And then just what, Lincoln Hill kind of they came in under budget. And it was, for me, I felt like they came in under budget, and we have a working relationship with him. He knows Moab, he knows what we've been doing for the last few years, stuff. And so I kind of felt like that was pretty important and stuff. So I mean, that's, I kind of waited it, or not waited it, but, thought that Lincoln Hill was the best move.
Great.
Going over the proposals.
Questions? Motion.
I move to award the contract for lobbyist services to Lincoln Hill Partners and authorize the mayor to execute a contract for 2023 lobbying services.
All right. Thanks, Kalen. Second.
I'll second.
All right. Motion made by Kalen, seconded by Luke to approve Lincoln Hill for our lobbyist services for 2023. Any discussion, Kalen? Luke? Anybody else? Ronnie?
I will be voting against this, and it's nothing against the lobbyists, but after our last meeting, I remain unclear from going from $40,000 a year to 70,000, what increased services or even what specific services we'll be getting. I look back in our January 22 packet when we talked about lobbying, about things that were supposed to come from that $40,000, and I'm not sure we received all of those, such as training for officials. I do think there, when it comes to hiring a lobbyist, especially if there are staff or council members or a mayor who are experienced in lobbying, they should get together and ask some strategic questions about lobbying, such as, what happens when your lobbyist works for competing interests, and how are they going to weigh representing your interests when it runs completely counter 180 degrees to some other clients. And I know these are professionals who can separate the two, but I do think there are basic questions that should be discussed and considered. I do feel like I am someone who believes, don't tell me, but show me. And I don't know that I've been shown an output and follow up on goals and how specifically they were responded to. So I don't feel comfortable bumping up the money, even though I understand that might be the reality that we're in terms of costs of these services. So let me just see. That was all my points. So yeah, just so you know, and just so everyone's clear, I do think lobbying is important. I do think you should spend money on it. I'm just uncomfortable going from 40 to 70 without more information.
Thanks, Ronnie. Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of Kalen's motion to approve lobbyist services for Lincoln Hill?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Me.
Ronnie opposed. Motion passes 4-1. And just so everybody knows, Carly and I are going to be coordinating Moab City's legislative committee. Next meeting, I'll talk about this later, but we'll be making those assignments, and we will be engaging Casey to meet with us on a weekly basis. And then also with the league's legislative group will be, he'll be a part of that as well. And like I've mentioned to you all, I plan to be way involved with the legislative session this year and intend to take great advantage of Casey and his connections up on the Hill. All right, last item of business is 7.3, the consideration of acceptance of an annexation petition from sponsor Ellen Weinstein for Shamrock Communications LLC for approximately 3.006 acres located at approximately 1480 South Highway 191, and to proceed with the certificate of process. Summer, is Corey waiting? Okay, so just so everybody knows, you are not approving an annexation at this point. You are just accepting their petition. And that basically means that they've gone through their initial annexation procedures. They're complete. And so we're moving to the next phase of the process. So any questions? Ronnie?
I don't know if any of you noticed, because usually the public sends us stuff before 6 p.m. and I noticed we got one email right at 6 p.m. with concerns about this. So thanks for explaining, and I think it's just good for that another person to understand. This is just going through the process, and in my experience, we've been taught and encouraged to let the annexation process play out. But if people do have concerns or just excitement about this potential annexation, the next step would be a public hearing where, you know, they could present that.
Is the next step a public hearing?
Yes.
Okay, yes, great.
I think
Thanks,
it goes,
Ronnie.
yeah, planning commission next and then to public hearing. Yeah.
Right, good. Any other questions, comments? Kaylin?
I'm just curious about the process. If I understand it correctly, between now and the public hearing, there's an opportunity for affected entities or parties
Correct.
to protest.
Mm-hmm.
And
There's a process. Protest to see if there's. Protest and no person, if no protests are received.
And is there a threshold standard for a protest to initiate that process, or does any protest, regardless of its form?
My understanding is that it does have to be an effective public entity or it has to be by definition. It talks about like a rural property owner, but it's very specific in state code as to what that is. I don't know if Lisa was asking has that information in front of her. That she could help with that piece. I did not actually.
Okay,
Told her we'd come back.
but it's governed by state code.
Yeah, who can protest is governed by state code.
Yes.
And then who can file in district court is also, if someone were to want to sue the city over the ultimate annexation, that is also defined.
Lisa, do you have any input?
Summer was saying, I presume that was Summer, but you're right. There's two avenues. If there's no protest, there's certain timelines where you'll have public hearings, issue decisions and so forth. And if there are protests, you'll have a situation where you would create a boundary commission, have them make the decision, and then it comes back to you within 30 days, approving or disapproving the annexation. That's down the road. So what you're at right now is you're saying the petition, we've crossed off each one of the steps towards where we are, so we can now certify the petition for further evaluation.
And Lisa, Caitlin's other question was just, are there specific entities that can file a protest, or is it just anyone? And it was my understanding that affected entities can file a protest, but there's also one specific piece in state code, and I can't remember what the term is called, but it's like a rural property owner. And
That is correct.
Narrowly defined in state code.
Yes, the rural property owner can, affected entities, private parties, but on top of that, city council members, believe it or not, in code. So, I mean, if people want to file a protest, it's pretty broad, but it lists 4 or 5 categories, those which I've already identified.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lisa, our city attorney, for those that are wondering who Lisa is.
You bet.
Any other questions about this agenda item? All right, I'll call for the motion.
I'll move to accept the annexation petition from sponsor Ellen Weinstein for Shamrock Communities LLC for approximately 3.006 acres located at approximately 1480 South Highway 191, and to proceed with the certification process.
Thanks, Tony. Second.
I'll second that.
All right, we've got a motion made by Tawny, seconded by Jason. Any further discussion, Tawny?
No.
Jason?
No, I'd just like to kind of echo what everybody said, that this is not approving it, and that these concerned citizens, this is not a done deal, because of this.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. All right, that is the end of our general business, and now we'll move to city manager updates.
All right, good evening, everyone. Forgive me, I'm recovering from a cold. I have a couple of updates on some long-term initiatives that city staff are working on, just that we've been touching base on here and there. But since it's been about a month since we met, I thought I might as well let you know what's been worked on since we last saw each other. First, we've approached Grand County about some issues we have with dispatch services. This has been a long time conversation over the past year. I've spoken with the county administrator, Mallory, about potentially coming up with a term sheet and a contract before we contribute our annual contribution to the county for dispatch services. And they're open to like a year one kind of contract as an option. So we're coming up with a term sheet. And we're doing that in close conjunction with, we've gotten input from Jason, from the police department, from EMS, I believe from fire too. We've also been sort of exploring some options when it comes to, coordinating with DPS or dispatch services, hearing what the new sheriff has in mind when it comes to the provision of these services. So that's just ongoing, and we're hammering out some of the details, but should be more concrete and probably by the end of the month, and we'll go from there. But we're working really hard to coordinate with all the players who are interested. So if you hear of someone who feels like they're disconnected, please just send them my way or Jared's. We don't mean to exclude anybody. It's just a lot of moving parts. Another agreement that we're working on is the ILA with the school district for the school resource officer. We have had a draft into their attorney for several months now, and we're just waiting to hear back from the attorney for their approval or comments. In the meantime, we are providing the SRO service. The ILA just sort of formalizes expectations, talks about how we are being repaid for some of the services. Certainly would love to have it in place, but people should know that the SRO service is being provided even despite the presence of the ILA. Really good news on the Walnut Lane front. That bid has closed, and we received a couple of really good looking proposals, and we'll be putting together a selection committee, and we will want council members to participate on that community if there's interest. And I think the mayor will reach out and coordinate with who would be great, who might be interested in participating. Fortunately, we also have, Jason Glidden, the housing manager up in Park City, who underwent a similar process, who is willing to lend his expertise to the selection. So just watch for that, and we'll start to dig into that. Really, really exciting to see that moving along. I had a really good conversation with Joe Lima today. He realizes he's been a little busy for the past season, but he has every intention of coming to the council and presenting what he found from his sound measuring activities this summer. So I know I've gotten some questions on that, just so you know, he's intending to do it just as wrapping up some other projects. Can't wait to hear what he discovered.
The next meeting of January, February.
Yeah, January. He has a goal at the end of January, but it sounded like he's quite busy. So he knows we're curious.
Can we just ask, was that like a formalized contract, or was it just an informal?
He was volunteering.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really, he came as a citizen to be heard, and I almost see it as just a second citizens to be heard update about what he discovered. And I think he wants to produce a report so you guys have something tangible to look into. And thanks to Joe. It's really nice of him to do that. A couple upcoming dates to remember. First, the RAP tax grant program is about to kick off. So there's a Q&A session for potential applicants tomorrow from 4 to 6 at the Mark. If you are interested in applying, Annie and Kelly will be at the Mark, and they will be able to answer questions about the process. The deadline for submissions is March 1st. And finally, just a reminder that strategic planning is coming up next week on the 19th and the 20th. Reach out to Sasha if you would like help coordinating a room out at Redcliffe's. The mayor and I are spending the night, so you can join the party if you want to.
Yeah, it'll be fun. We're gonna have fun.
This is gonna be really fun. We'll get some materials out to you ahead of time, including like the slide presentations from the reports from staff and some documents that I believe Ronnie had requested, just to like spiff everyone up about where we've been and just to orient the discussion.
Oh yeah, just so people know, I was just trying to save myself a little time, so not reading stuff or reviewing stuff last minute. So trying to think through, okay, this is probably a good time of year to look at the general plan, or the community vision, but just trying to think through what guiding documents maybe it's good to review before as opposed to after.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so like the previous strategic plan, I think the visioning, and we're putting together some other materials that just might be nice to refresh if you have the time. And finally, I have a couple, like, welcome to Carly's Good News Corner, because I have some good news to report on a couple of fronts. First, actually, with the help of Casey Hill, we were alerted to the potential for a grant that the state had issued. And my understanding was it was like remnant ARPA funds that they were, I don't know if they were left over. I don't totally understand how those became available. But we had about a weekend to put a grant together, and Casey did some heavy lobbying for us, and we received it. It was an unusual situation where we had GWISA apply for the grant because they did not receive any ARPA funds. They weren't an entity that was eligible for them like we were. So we helped them apply for that grant, and it's for an interconnect, which has been on our radar for quite a while. It's a 50-50 match, $300,000 project. And so we're hoping for a cost share with GWISA for our 50%. But really good news, it adds some redundancy to our system. It's been on the docket for a long time. So thank you to Casey for getting that and making us aware of it and helping to kind of push it through. So a good $150,000 we didn't know we had, and now we do. And then finally, something that's really exciting, and it's really, like, I can't believe we achieved it. And really, when I say we, it is, I think, council and Ben. We received this year the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. And only Ben knows what this means, because because those are the circles he runs in. And I have a little blurb about it. This is a really big deal. And I know it was like a goal of Ben's in mind.
I
but he
remember
did
him mentioning it.
Yes, that he's like, wouldn't it be great if we could achieve it? So I'll just read it, because this is a pretty fun thing to get fussy about. The Distinguished Budget Presentation Award recognizes governments that succeed in creating budget documents that reflect guidelines and best practices created by the National Advisory Council and the GFOA. To earn recognition, budget documents must meet program criteria and excel as a policy document, financial plan, operations guide, and communication tool. So only about 10% of local governments in Utah achieve this. So congrats to a wonderful budget prepared by the council and to Ben.
Nice
right.
job, Ben.
And yeah,
that
that's
it?
all I have. Yeah.
Thanks, Carly. All right, council reports. Jason. I know
So-
it's been pretty busy over the holidays,
No.
up in the mountains and.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been pretty quiet. There's been a few things that have kind of come up that I've kind of worked through or kind of talked to a few things. I had an airport board meeting, but it got canceled last minute. So that didn't happen. Today I had an EMS board meeting, and it was good. Talked about a lot of things about we approved 2 new board members, or one new board member and one board member who is we wanted to stay on. So we're excited about that. There's a couple things that kind of came up in that meeting. They also talked about dispatch a little bit, and you know where things were kind of going with that. And they said they had a good productive meeting yesterday as well and stuff. Last year they had 1,649 calls, which is about a 2% decrease from the year before. So not much. Also with that, the sales tax that they get was up from what they thought it was going to be. So, you know, we look like we might have a strong fall that helped out with financing things. We had the emergency manager for EMS and fire was at the meeting and gave a little presentation about what he's doing. It sounds like he's very busy and he's doing a good job. One of the things that he brought up that was an issue, there's been an issue kind of with the city and the county, is that a lot of times EMS and fire aren't being made aware of road closures. And so they kind of wanted to see what could be done for the cities and the counties when they have road closures to let EMS and fire know so that they can go around those areas if there is an emergency. And other than that, that was about it with that. I think that there there was kind of there was a Facebook exchange over the holidays. I saw that Luke kind of jumped in there about a business who had some concerns with road closures. And I was gonna, just about businesses not being made aware of road closures. And I think Ben had a chance to meet with this business owner, and I was kind of emailing back and forth with her because I was out of town, and told her that I would be willing to meet with her. In the end, she said that she had a very good meeting with Ben and addressed her concerns and stuff, but there was definitely some concerns about if with this water line project that was going in, if how much notification businesses were going to get about the impact to their businesses and stuff. And so we'll see. I don't know if anything's going to happen with that, but it was kind of interesting.
Carly, do you want to talk about
Yeah,
our increased work we're talking about?
sure. We definitely, so when I met with, we did like performance evaluations and like goal setting for each department over the past few months. And one of them has been engagement when it comes to, so especially with like OB's new department, the Public Utilities Department, having a more robust engagement. And I think we've seen an uptick in notification when it has come to a lot of aspects of like emergency repairs, like OB sends out an email to a bunch of us when there's a repair going down, I think including
Yeah.
to the council. So everyone is more informed about that, making sure they're calling dispatch and letting them know like, hey, fire, there's not going to be a hydrant here, or just doing those really basic notifications that just haven't been happening and they're not part of the routine. So we're going to try to standardize more when it comes to primarily, like an easy one for us to do right now is emergency shutoffs, and I think that's the ones that are most disruptive. It's very difficult to get information out. Sometimes it's in the middle of the night and those kinds of things. So sort of starting to standardize that. The second thing that we should have in all of our construction contracts is like really robust public engagement, and usually the contractor having like a public engagement specialist who is it's usually a subcontractor. It even can be done remotely from Salt Lake City if they're preparing the materials and they're like doing the website and they're calling people and everything. And then that sub-consultant working really closely with Lisa on the ground, and Lisa even being part of the project team as it's being managed to anticipate controversy and then just sort of oversee that part of the engagement. I think it's too hard to expect like our construction manager to worry to do that. They're kind of dealing with logistics, safety, all of those kinds of things. So having like Lisa's eye on it might produce better results. And it's just been I think this Mill Creek Water project has been a really good like learning opportunity to show like where there are some engagement gaps. So we have some ideas about how to improve it moving forward. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I was doing, because I remember when they were doing like UDOT Main Street, we had someone in our,
Yeah.
in our business, like once a week telling us
Mhm.
what was going on, and it was really good and stuff.
Yeah.
And it just seems like it should just be written into every contract.
Right.
Yeah,
this
agreed.
has happened. But, and so that was basically, that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Ronnie.
Let's see. Not a lot of meetings because of the holiday. Just as a heads up, the mayor and Mary McGann and Jacques Hodler from the county and I are meeting tomorrow to talk about timing of the lobbying meeting to DC in February or March to lobby for continued funding of the MTIP project and have some discussions about the future of the site. I was just going to tell you guys, if you're interested outside of the Legislative Policy Committee meetings at the Utah League of Cities and Towns during the legislative session, which is coming up for those not in the know, I think it's January 17th through March 3rd. Through Utah League of Cities and Towns, there are daily briefings available to those of us who are members and active. And those can be interesting. They can be not related to our area. So I would just say, if you're interested, it's a good way to learn about some of the other different hot issues and just to learn about the process of how fast things move. So usually it's a call-in thing where you let Carson Eilers, and I'll forward the email to you guys, know you're interested. And then you can just tune in or not from 10:15 to 10:30 every morning during the legislative session to see which bills are hitting the floor and So I just think it's a good learning opportunity if you listen in on a few of those, even if you don't make all of those. And then if you are more engaged, yeah, it's a good way to track. Let's see. I wasn't sure, and I'll just throw this out there for all of us, if we had the dates yet for the local officials day for Utah League of Cities and Towns up in Salt Lake, and if people were planning to go. And I also didn't know some of the other boards I'm on, people have been doing their re-upping for their annual Open and Public Meetings Act training and board meeting trainings online. And on the one hand, that has the benefit of being faster, but I think a lot of us feel like it's not as useful as when someone, and now I'm going to forget his name, from the Association of Counties, comes down and does an in-person meeting. So anyway, there's just so you know, there's been some discussion at some of the boards I'm on about, oh, well, maybe we'll be able to have an online in-person training again this year. I just know if someone does come to train, sometimes that helps us with the various boards that we're on. So I guess keep your eye out, hold off on your online training if you're bored with it, maybe. And then the main thing was, I had said in the last meeting, I would report on this November 17th meeting we had with the Southeast Utah Riparian Partnership, just because it was kind of extensive. And just as a reminder to you guys, there is a memorandum of understanding under which the city has a representative. This is the body that used to be called the Tamarisk Coalition. It has members, like just at this last meeting, we had everyone from Rim to Rim Restoration, the Forest Service, Park Service, BLM, particularly the Fire and Fuels Program, DNR, the Fire, Forestry, and State Lands, folks from the UMTRA Project, Nature Conservancy, Tim Graham is there, a lot of you know, Utah Conservation Corps, Plateau Restoration, and others. And so just some interesting things that were discussed, and we meet twice a year, and I will try and make sense of this. One of the things that the group does is send out occasional educational mailers on different issues, and the topic can vary, but the last one you guys probably all got was about non-native species and efforts to rid the valley of Ravenna grass. So if you haven't seen that and you're interested in it, you can look up information under Grand County Weed Department about things you can do. I know I realized, unbeknownst to me, a few years ago, I had one in my yard, so I dug that little sucker up. So anyway, we just spent a little time discussing what the next mailer might be about. We haven't settled yet, but it may be about this Play Clean Go campaign that I've mentioned before, about educating people about how to make sure they're not transporting non-native species when they go. So I know in a lot of cases that's having seed head on your clothing or gear or pets. And just along those lines, I thought I would throw this out for the city and Annie. The Park Service put in for a grant to get these boot brushes, which you can use to hopefully brush seeds off your boots when you leave a site. And the station with an informative sign and the boot brush is $450. So I just thought it might be something we might want to entertain through Annie to have along the parkway, just to help with education about this. And just so there was discussion about how there could be a presentation related to this for the city and the county this year. Let's see. Just various things that might interest you guys, because I know you're all outdoor folks and a lot of you are river runners and know a lot about non-native species and the various benefits of working on them. Rim to Rim Restoration out at the Mayberry Preserve has been planting drought-resistant cottonwoods, in part through a study with Northern Arizona University. So just as we all think about climate change, kind of some interesting things happening in science there. Let's see, some of the planting that they were going to do along Mill and Pat Creek was put off due to the floods. But there was a report on the work that happened with Team Rubicon, largely to deal with debris. And I'm probably gonna get this number wrong because I'm not sure how good my notes were, but I think 3,000 cubic yards. Those of you who've been walked the drainage from, if you've been on the trail from 100 south and 100 west, kind of down to 500 west, just to see all the changes from the flood, you probably will come across just a massive debris pile that they collected and brought together just off Dream Drive, because there was basically an earthen dam forming. a debris dam that probably could have flooded some places. So good that that got collected. I know Rim to Ram and DNR has been working with Carly to discuss things that could happen with that pile. And one of them, which is kind of interesting if you're not aware of it, might be that some of that wood might be made available to the Wood for Life program, which is basically a firewood bank for individuals who need access to firewood. And I'm sure Carly at some point can let us know. I think it's another possibility that that could be burned. At any rate, let's see, just some observations about the flooding in a lot of places over time where work has been done on bank stabilization. You can definitely see where that paid off and you didn't have trenching or erosion. We had a really good presentation from Daniel Lay, who many of you probably know, hydrologist with the Manti La Salle National Forest, on the South Zone categorical exclusion, talking about flooding degradation they're seeing in the watershed, and they've had incision of up to 20 feet by, say, the picnic day use area, and upland of that, also gullying, nick points. Some of you will know what that means. So they're addressing this in a number of ways, both through exclosures of areas, of sensitive areas, but also trying to do some reduction in gullying, which is important in part because what they're starting to see, Daniel's seeing in places, is sufficient erosion. And I've noticed this because I've walked up there, where you're like, why is there water here? And you realize there's a seep where I haven't seen one before. And I'm a hydrologist, so I might be using the wrong word, but there's basically a pool of water. And what's happened is there's been enough incision in some places where it's dug down deep enough that it's getting into the water table and exposing Mancos Shale. And you definitely don't want that for the health of your watershed because it can have an impact on water quality. So Daniel was explaining one of the things you try to do is find ways that you can mimic nature, and say one of the ways a lot of people are doing it is mimicking beaver dams, but basically mimic nature to try and stop more sediment so it starts to build up again. So that isn't as cut down as deep and you don't have the water table exposed. So he had some diagrams and long-term plans to do that as much as every 50 feet. Of course, it's a funding issue, but fascinating presentation. I suggest anyone get in touch with him at the Forest Service. Let's see. One of the last things we discussed was this body tends to be one that puts together collectively proposals for what's called the WRI, or the Watershed Restoration Initiative. And some of you might have read it, but the TI actually had an article in the December 8th issue. The headline was over 164,000 acres improved through habitat projects. Utah Watershed Restoration Initiative features several partners. So at any rate, just some of the takeaways that might be interesting to you guys about this was created in 2006 through Utah's Department of Natural Resources. And since that time, they've improved nearly 2.4 million acres of Utah landscapes. And let's see, that was through 2,570 restoration projects, and creating an estimated 6,012 jobs. So aside from these projects having benefits for wildlife and water quality and quantity, they also have benefits in the ways of making jobs and reducing fire hazard. So I think that was it, other than just a reminder that we do occasionally have to sign that MOU again as a city. And I think Cara has been in touch with Carly about signing on to the next one. I think that was it.
All right, thanks, Ronnie. Luke.
Yeah, I don't have much. The local homeless council was canceled, or there wasn't one in December, so didn't attend that. And then I was at the Trail Mix meeting earlier today, where there's going to be a maintenance day coming up this coming Monday from 4 to 6 p.m. light permitting at Pipe Dream by off of Jackson Street. And then I unfortunately had to leave that meeting early to attend a webinar for work. But other than that, I don't have anything else to report.
Thanks, Luke. Kaylin.
I attended a travel council meeting, and Much of the meeting was spent interviewing and then recommending to the county commission applicants for the 3 empty seats. And as well as reviewing the budget that the commission had approved for their 2023 activities. Primarily the advertising campaigns and discussing them. I attended a Community Renewable Energy Agency board meeting and should have some substantive information for you in the coming months. Are making progress. And I attended a solid waste board meeting and I was primarily concerned with approving this year's budget as well as some fee increases for customers outside of the city. City customers are governed by a franchise agreement, which requires additional negotiation, which hasn't happened yet. That's what I've got.
Thanks, Caitlin. Tawny.
I don't have a lot. I did attend the Housing Authority Board meeting in December, but I just stayed long enough to give my report and left because I had a conflict. And I attended the police banquet the other night and it was really nice. It was very impressive to see where we've come in a short time. So a big round of applause to Jared and your whole entire team. That's it.
Healthcare Special Services. Didn't we have a meeting in December?
We did, but I think we reported on it in December.
Oh, okay.
And we have another one Thursday.
Thanks for the reminder. Okay, thanks, Tawny. I participated today in the Community Healthcare Assessment and Planning meeting with it was coordinated through the Moab Regional Hospital, looking at priorities in healthcare for the next 3 years. A lot of participation. Thank you, Chief, for being a part of that. I think your input was really, really well received. Also attended the Zoom Water Utility Resource Management Plan meeting, and Luke, you were part of that as the focus group member, and that was very informative. Also went to the awards banquet with the Moab Police Department. That was really good. It was nice to see the officers all dressed up with their shiny shoes and get their badges. It was a lot of fun and really nice. Went to the swearing in of the new county elected officials, and it was quite well attended. A lot of police officers there, the sheriff's office, and a lot of other people. So it was really good to see our new electeds coming online. In case you haven't heard, I believe I forwarded you, the National Park Service announced that the timed entry system will continue again next year, although it is going to extend through October. I believe it starts in April, and then they extended it through October this year. They're also going to working on making adjustments. They heard a lot from the state and from the community. So they're going to be incorporating those changes. So hopefully we'll see some improvement to that system this year. Ashley Kornblatt penned a really good opinion piece in the Salt Lake Tribune that was in the Sunday paper. If anybody's interested in that, I'm happy to forward to you, or you could look it up on the Tribune. Basically, it was about the success of the timed entry system and how majority of the people really liked it. And it, even though there were some challenges getting into the park, the in-park experience was very, very, very much improved. I sent you all the council board and committee assignment members. I plan to present that as a consent agenda item next meeting. So I've talked to most of you about it. If there's any boards or committees you'd like to switch out or change, please work together to make those happen. Otherwise, and let me know what those changes are, and then we'll have it on our agenda at our next meeting for approval. And then last, we got an email from Lisa today, and I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing this or not, but we've got a new logo. Ben and Carly and myself and Lisa and Love Communications have been working over the last several months. And thanks to Ben and his thoughtful eye, we finalized our agenda or our logo, and you're going to be seeing it on our vehicles, on our business cards. Y'all are going to get new business cards on our stationery, and it's on our facilities. And so here it is.
I couldn't bring it up on the, do you have it, Summer? Do we want to zoom?
Yep.
I have
You've got it in your email.
your inbox. I just can't wait for the public to see it too. Let's
All right,
see.
let's
Let's
see if we
let's
can get it
flash it up there.
It's pretty nice.
It is.
I mean, and no
It turned out
offense to
really well.
Arches National Park, but we were really kind of tired of Delicate. Arch. It's done its job for our community.
You can retire.
It gets a break. this
So we
time.
wanted to highlight the mountains, the portal and the river. And I think Love Communications did a great job. Are you guys gonna be able to pull it up? Everybody's waiting.
You can go hold your iPad up to the
gonna
the
say, hold
camera.
your
Just get on it, get on it.
You,
We'll let you know when you're close.
Oh, got larger. Anyway, so people will be seeing it around town. It's beautiful. I think we came up with a really good design and this is probably gonna be it. I mean, I don't know how long it took us to get to this point, so it's nice to, see. Oh, there we go.
Yay.
Yay.
And we were concerned, honestly, that people were going to look at this and say, the mountains aren't behind the portal,
Yeah, this doesn't exist.
but it does. And we found places where you can actually see that exact scene with the red rocks, the river and the mountain. So there you have it. And that's it for me. Any questions, comments? Alrighty.
I will make a comment. I just congratulate you all for getting through a logo without drawing blood because logo battles can be, yes, famous for decades.
Right, exactly. Thanks, Ronnie.
Thanks for getting some nature back into the logo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome. And not just an arch. No offense, National Park Service. We love Delicate Arch. All right, we do have on the agenda closed session, but this is just a placeholder. We don't really have anything to discuss about litigation tonight. We just want to make sure that if there ever is an issue that comes up that we're not prepared for, we have it on our agenda. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by